When the electromagnetic field is fluctuating in a way that gives rise to linear waves, as in it's going up and down in part of its field, that essentially creates in the long run a vibration that is a certain color. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking nanometers. So imagine a centimeter and then zoom in on that as far as you can. Colors don't actually exist, but we perceive them. Now, what they're attached to actually exists, and by actually exists, I mean has a physical form. Consciousness, perception, is not the same as wave dynamics. And so when electromagnetic radiation is propagating at 400 or so nanometers, for example, you get the color purple. And basically, a person's consciousness is shaped and influenced by people and life circumstances. So when you can isolate yourself and have a set intention, what is good to do is try to understand that reality is governed by the details about its nature, and then those details are observed by individuals or by entities with consciousness. And, well, under the presumption that they actually exist and this is happening, events are given, rise to, or whatever you say. Think about it this way. If there was no universe to observe, there would be no reason for a human being to exist. If there were no human beings to observe the universe, there would be no universe. You know what I mean? It's a bold claim, because to insinuate that what I'm really getting at here is that consciousness itself is what observed reality in the very beginning, and that caused it, based on the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, to transform. And it went from a zero-dimensional point to a four-dimensional world that we're in right now, but it's probably five, and there's ways out. Safe ways. And the colors that you can see are, proof of this. I mean, what angle to tackle this at? Sorry, I'm kind of thinking about this on the spot as I go. Phase of existence in a cone that has a volume of about 14 billion times you know, pi r squared to get its height and stuff with the base. That is the observable universe. That is what we are currently interacting with, or maybe inside of, is a cone. And the way we get to this is by thinking, well, the light directly in front of me is expanding farther away, and the light that's escaping the side of my view is going outward as well. And then you understand why the observational cone is a cone. But the center isn't anywhere. Where's the center of you? Behind your eyes? No. It's everywhere. And light is everywhere. And so basically, the only way to get past experiencing everyday life is to go into a levels-based paradigm where the phase at which the universe is being observed by you determines the difference between, existing with light surrounding you. I mean, we hope it's behind us, but then again, if you were to turn around and look, you're changing your point of reference, unless you're existing as a zero-dimensional point. So there are multiple phases that the universe can exist in. And like I said, within this cone is vibrational. Everything in this system is a vibrational-based paradigm, possibly spinning. And so wave mechanics determine how things work generally. Now, in 10 trillion years, this might not be the case for multiple reasons. But higher levels of consciousness lead to higher levels of understanding of the same concept. And so if you yourself can change the phase of your consciousness, you know what I'm saying, you'll be able to interact with different functions of reality. And so what I was doing before I made this video was trying to imagine like a grid in front of my eyes as vividly as I could that took up the whole space, and try it several times over a couple minutes and you'll be able to get a really good one. But what this is going to do is this is going to sync up the part of your brain that's responsible for visual thoughts with a phase of the universe that kind of functions on the contrast between space and stuff. Space and stuff. And that's what the grid is functioning on. Now, when you advance farther, you can make it flash. You can make it change colors. You can find its symmetry and rotate it and fold it and stuff. But the point is to lock your brain in with, because all these phases exist simultaneously. And the arrow of time is a strictly Newtonian paradigm. It only happens with human bodies and things that are existing on a scale, that's between that of a grain of rice and that of a black hole. Things that are gravity-based mess with time and space. And so when you think about the fact that light passes through itself, you can sort of like imagine imagine that you're in a bell, and the bell vibrates at a F natural. Okay? Well, all of a sudden you start to hum F natural when the bell's not ringing. It picks up on your vibration because that's its natural resonance. So this is the type of meditation that you have to do. You have to match the natural resonance with the phase. And so since the phases always exist, no matter which one you're in, you're going to be locked into with, And so it's spinning, it's vibrating, and, there are levels to it. And there's a distinction between levels because it's a way of categorizing information. If you take a flat piece of paper and then you rotate it sideways, all of a sudden it's invisible. I mean, technically speaking, it's, you've taken a 2D surface and encoded it in a 1D space by turning it sideways. And so now what can exist? 0D, 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D. Who could say it could be infinite? But there has to be a geometry for, the spaces to coexist. There has to be a framework, like a lattice, like some kind of pattern or rule that they abide by. And honestly, the way I believe things are is that there could be infinite encodings in every single instance of anything that exists. Because everything could be infinitely dimensional and holographic. And it could just be rotated in a way that keeps it from interacting with things that are rotating the other way. As long as there's enough space between those geometries or whatever. You put all of a sudden you're compressing all this data, and it's beyond compressing, because if the spaces are infinite, then there's no limit to the amount of information that can go in. So you've turned your piece of paper sideways, you've got a line now. How many lines can you store versus how many pieces of paper can you store? Good thing you've got a 3-dimensional box that all this stuff is going in. You know what I'm saying? And then the higher dimensions of the box exist, but they don't interact with the lower dimensions of the box in the same sense. So if you could figure out the pattern in which to link the box's higher dimensions with, the physical aspects of the box in this baryonic portion of space, you could then, rotate the cabinet, and then all of a sudden you can have as many cabinets going in here as you want. And then you could have as many 5-dimensional ones going into the 6-dimensional space. And it's like an infinite fractal.